The night Mandy met Scarlett's boyfriend, something in her shifted. Not because of him, because of Scarlett. Scarlett hadn't changed. But suddenly, everyone noticed her. And Mandy realized something she wasn't prepared for. She didn't want what Scarlett had. She wanted to be her. The moment Go Young-soo walked into a room, something in the air changed. It wasn't loud. It wasn't announced. It was the way conversations tapered off mid-sentence. The way a waiter who had been ignoring a table for 10 minutes suddenly materialized, attentive and apologetic. The way women who had never met him tracked his silhouette as he moved, not flirtatiously, but with the kind of attention people gave something they knew. Instinctively, not to underestimate. Something ancient in the brain said, "Pay attention to this." Scarlett Harper had stopped noticing it weeks ago. That was the thing about being with him. You eventually stopped cataloging the reactions of everyone else and just existed inside the gravitational pull of him. She sat across from him at the corner table of Miso, a minimalist Japanese restaurant in Tribeca, where the lighting was warm amber and the sake came in handmade ceramic cups. Young-soo was reading the menu, not the food menu, the wine list, and his jaw was set at that particular angle that meant he was thinking about something else entirely. He was beautiful in a way that was almost violent. 6'2", broad through the shoulders in a way that his black dress shirt couldn't quite contain. His sleeves were folded to the elbow, and the ink that covered his forearms, dark, elaborate, winding like smoke, shifted when his hand moved. His face was all clean angles and controlled expressions, sharp brow, features cut with quiet precision, a mouth that was soft only when it was on her. His dark hair was pushed back, slightly disheveled in that effortless way that Scarlett knew took exactly zero effort. He simply looked like that, all the time. "She's 10 minutes late," he said, without looking up. "She's always 10 minutes late." Scarlett smiled into her water glass. "Give her grace." He set the wine list down. His eyes moved to her, dark, steady, the kind of gaze that had taken her weeks to stop flinching from. And something in them shifted, like a lock releasing. It only happened when he looked at her. "You look beautiful tonight," he said. Quiet. Certain. Not a compliment. A fact he was reporting. Heat moved up the back of Scarlett's neck. Even now, weeks in, he could do that. One sentence. That voice slow, unhurried, slightly accented in a way that made every word sound like it had been considered before being allowed out. She was petite and curved, her deep brown skin luminous against the soft burgundy of her wrap dress, her box braids falling loosely over her shoulders. She had dressed carefully tonight. She wanted Mandy to see, not perform, just see, that she was happy. "You're only saying that because you want the good sake," she told him. The corner of his mouth moved. That was his smile. She had learned to read it like Braille. Then Mandy arrived. Mandy Wallace stepped into the restaurant the way she always entered spaces. With intent. She was tall, dark-skinned, conventionally stunning in the way that had always made other women in a room recalibrate. High cheekbones. Long legs. A blowout that caught the light. She spotted Scarlett and her face opened into warmth and she was crossing the floor and they were hugging and Scarlett was laughing and it was easy. It was familiar. It was them. Then Mandy turned and saw Young-soo standing. He stood because Scarlett was greeting her guest. It was reflexive, controlled. The kind of courtesy that looked effortless because it was ingrained. He didn't reach out first. He simply stood and waited with the particular stillness of a man who understood that his time was the one being granted. Mandy's smile froze for a fraction of a second. Not long enough for Scarlett to catch. Long enough for Young-soo to clock. "Young-soo, this is Mandy. My oldest friend." Scarlett touched his arm as she said it. The lightest graze. Unconscious. The intimacy of a woman who had earned the right to touch him without thinking. Something in Mandy's eyes catalogued it instantly. "It's nice to meet you," Young-soo said. His voice was polite. His eyes were evaluating. "Oh, you too," Mandy said, and her voice came out slightly breathless. She recovered fast. She was good at recovering, and slid into the conversation with practiced ease. Asking about the restaurant. Complimenting Scarlett's dress. But something had shifted behind her eyes. She had expected Scarlett's first boyfriend to be, well, she hadn't expected this. Mandy had always been the one men turned toward. In their hometown, in college, in every room they had ever shared. Scarlett was beautiful. Mandy wasn't blind or cruel enough to deny it. But Scarlett had always been softer, quieter. The kind of beautiful that didn't demand immediate attention. But here, in this low-lit restaurant, in this city, Scarlett was different. Mandy noticed it in increments as the evening progressed. The waiter came to their table within 2 minutes of her arrival. He made eye contact with Scarlett when he addressed the group. The couple at the next table, well-dressed, clearly someone, glanced over twice. Not at Mandy, at Scarlett. And Young-soo. He barely spoke. When he did, it was precise and quiet, and people leaned in to catch it. He asked Mandy 2 questions about herself, genuine questions, politely phrased, and then he sat back and watched. Not rudely, clinically, the way a man who read people for a living read them. It made Mandy feel like she was being filed somewhere she didn't want to be filed. She laughed too loudly at her own story about a gallery opening she'd attended. She touched her hair too many times. She tried to steer the conversation toward herself. Have I told you about the Paris trip? And watched Young-soo's attention slide back to Scarlett with the effortlessness of a tide returning to shore. Halfway through the meal, Scarlett began fidgeting with her left earring. It was subtle, something she did when a social situation was making her work too hard. Young-soo caught it before Mandy did. He said nothing, but he leaned slightly forward, redirected the conversation toward something Scarlett had mentioned wanting to talk about. The tension in Scarlett's shoulders dissolved. She relaxed like a woman being held, even though he hadn't touched her. Mandy watched it happen. Not just that he shifted the conversation, but how. The timing of it. The way Scarlett didn't even seem to notice she'd been steadied. Her laugh came easier after that. Looser. Lighter. Mandy's eyes lingered. On the way Scarlett held her glass. On the way she tilted her head when she listened. On the way his attention settled on her. Not dramatically, not performatively, but like it had already decided where it belonged. Mandy smiled at something being said, but she wasn't listening anymore. She felt something ugly rise in her chest that she was not yet ready to name. Scarlett hadn't become prettier, she thought, with a clarity that was almost painful. She'd become someone people noticed. And Mandy had absolutely no idea what to do with that. In the cab home, alone, she pulled up Scarlett's Instagram and stared at the most recent photo. Young-soo's hand at the small of Scarlett's back at some event. His face turned away from the camera. Scarlett's expression soft and utterly unaware of how radiant she looked. She stared at it for a very long time. 3 weeks later, Scarlett stood in front of her bathroom mirror and felt, for the first time, genuinely unsettled. She and Mandy had met for brunch twice, since the dinner at Miso. Both times had been fine, familiar, easy, full of old jokes and shared memories. But something kept snagging at the back of Scarlett's mind like a loose thread she couldn't stop pulling. Today, Mandy had shown up in a burgundy wrap dress. It was a different cut, a different fabric, but the color was exact. Scarlett had worn burgundy to the dinner at Miso. Scarlett had noticed Mandy watching her more closely than usual, like she was trying to memorize something. She turned off the bathroom light and told herself she was overthinking it. Young-soo noticed before she admitted it to herself. He said nothing the first time. When Mandy started mirroring Scarlett's laughter, that particular low, bright sound that Scarlett made when something genuinely surprised her. He noticed when Mandy began ending her sentences the same way Scarlett did, with that slight upward inflection that was half question, half confidence. He said nothing when she showed up at the rooftop bar where he and Scarlett had planned an evening alone, claiming she'd been in the neighborhood. He said something the third time. She's copying you, he told Scarlett. They were in his penthouse apartment, all glass and low light, and the Manhattan skyline spilling through the floor-to-ceiling windows. Scarlett was sitting on the kitchen counter eating takeout from a carton, a habit he privately found distracting, and he was standing across from her with his hands in his pockets. It's not a coincidence. Scarlett looked up. She's my friend. I know who she is. His voice was even. I'm telling you what I see. Young-soo. She repeats things you say, 3 days after you say them. She showed up in the same lip color you wore on Friday. He watched her face. She asked you last week where you get your hair done, and then told you it was just curiosity. Scarlett set the carton down. I don't want to be the kind of person who thinks the worst of someone who's been in my life for years. He unfolded his arms and moved toward her. slow and deliberate, until he was close enough that she had to tilt her chin up to meet his gaze. He brought his hand up and tucked a loose braid behind her ear with a touch so careful it made her chest ache. "You're not thinking the worst of her," he said quietly. "You're just seeing her clearly for the first time. There's a difference. What if I'm wrong? What if I'm imagining it?" "You're not imagining it." He held her gaze. "I see it too. And what she's copying is proof, Scarlett. You don't imitate someone you feel superior to." She was quiet for a moment. His thumb traced her jaw. Once. And heat moved through her in a slow, heavy wave. "She doesn't need to do this," Scarlett said softly. "No. She doesn't." He leaned down and pressed his lips briefly to her temple. "But you don't need to carry it." The breaking point came at the Kong Foundation Gallery opening. It was a private event, invitation only, held in a sleek space in Chelsea. Young-soo had business, with one of the collectors attending. Scarlett had worn ivory, a fitted column dress, gold earrings, her braids loose and full around her face. She looked devastatingly elegant, and she knew it, and more importantly, she felt it. That was new. The feeling of it. Mandy appeared 40 minutes into the event. Scarlett blinked. "What are you?" "I ran into Sean at the door," Mandy said, naming an acquaintance who had vague connections to everyone. "He said it would be fine." She was wearing ivory. Not the same dress. Not the same shade. But close enough. Her hair was in box braids. Scarlett had never seen Mandy wear braids before. And the wine glass, held in both hands at chest height. Scarlett's habit. Picked up from Young-soo. Copied. Precisely. Mandy moved through the space with the calm, practiced ease of someone acting confident. Scarlett watched her stop to speak to two guests. Watched them respond. Watched Mandy tilt her head at the same angle Scarlett used when she was listening. And felt something cold and concrete settle into her stomach. She isn't just copying me, Scarlett realized. She's practicing being me. Young-soo appeared at her side. He said nothing. His hand settled at the base of her spine. Warm and grounding. And she felt him go still beside her in the way he went still when he was deciding something. Across the room, Mandy had begun speaking to a business contact of Young-soo's with the borrowed ease of a woman who believed she belonged there. "She knows what she's doing," Scarlett said quietly. "Yes," he said. His voice was flat. Scarlett looked up at him. His jaw was set. His eyes were cold and still. "Don't," she said. "I'm not doing anything. You have that look." He turned to her then, and the cold was gone, replaced by something that undid her completely. That particular attention. All of it. Focused entirely on her. "She's not worth the look," he said. "You are. Come with me." He guided her toward the far end of the gallery, his hand at her back. And she let herself be guided. And she tried to breathe through the sharp, sick feeling of watching someone try to wear your life like a costume. 2 days after the gallery, Mandy arrived at Young-soo's building. Security had called up. He hadn't told them no. She told herself it was an impulse. She told herself Scarlett had mentioned he might be alone. She told herself a dozen clean and reasonable things while she rode the elevator to the floor she had heard Scarlett mention once in passing. She was wearing Scarlett's perfume. She had bought it 3 weeks ago. Young-soo opened the door, and his expression didn't change. That was perhaps the most frightening thing about him, the absolute stillness. He simply looked at her with those dark, unreadable eyes and waited. Mandy breathed. She had practiced this. "I wanted to apologize. For the gallery. I overstepped." He said nothing. He stepped back and let her in, which she took for an invitation, and was probably a calculation. She sat on the edge of the long white sofa. He remained standing. She crossed her legs and tilted her head and let her voice drop to the particular register that had always worked before. "I think I've been making things uncomfortable," she said. "Between you and Scarlett. I admire what you both have. I wanted to be close to it." She looked up at him through her lashes. And she was aware of how she looked. And she reached for it the way she reached for every advantage she'd ever had. "I think, maybe, I've been a little jealous. Of her." She let the word land with its full implication. Young-soo was quiet for a long moment. She thought, in that silence, she almost thought. "You studied her carefully," he said. His voice was soft. Almost gentle. She leaned into it. "But you never understood her." The gentleness was gone. What replaced it was something else, not anger. Colder than anger. The particular cold of a man who had decided something and was simply informing you of the conclusion. Every movement you copied, every phrase, the way she holds her glass, the way she laughs. He watched her. And none of it worked because you don't know the first thing about where any of it comes from. You saw a result and tried to put on the result. But Scarlett doesn't move like that because she's performing. She moves like that because she's at peace. He paused. You are not at peace. And that's why nothing you wear of hers will ever fit. Mandy's face had gone hot. Her hands were clenched in her lap. That's not. You should leave. I wasn't trying to, you were. He moved toward the door and opened it. You should leave. Scarlett walked in at the worst possible moment. She had forgotten her jacket, a small, domestic errand, something that should have taken 30 seconds. She stepped off the elevator, and the apartment door was open, and she heard her name, her own name, in her own cadence, coming from a voice that wasn't hers. She walked in and saw Mandy standing from the sofa, face flushed and caught. Saw the posture, the exact tilt of hip she herself used, borrowed and worn and wrong on someone else's body. Saw Young-soo by the door with an expression that was rigid with controlled fury. The world went very quiet. Scarlett. His voice, immediately. But Scarlett was looking at Mandy. At the perfume she could now smell. Her perfume. The one she'd mentioned 3 weeks ago and watched Mandy type into her phone. At the hair. The earrings that were almost hers. The hurt was physical. A weight behind the sternum. I think you should go, Scarlett said. Her voice was steady. She was proud of that, distantly. I think you should go right now. Mandy left. She stepped out of the penthouse into the cold night air, the door closing softly behind her. The city felt different out here. Quieter. Sharper. Mandy wrapped her arms around herself as she waited for her car, heels clicking once against the pavement before she stilled. 2 men stood near the corner of the building, half-shadowed, smoking. They stood like men who expected to be obeyed. They didn't notice her. Their voices were low, controlled. The kind of quiet that carried more than shouting ever could. Mr. Go is here tonight, one said. Keep your distance. We don't want a repeat of last time. A pause. Smoke curled into the air. No weapons inside. That's his rule. The other man gave a short, humorless laugh. You don't make mistakes around the Go family. Silence again. Then, quieter. You don't cross them at all. Mandy stood very still. She didn't understand what she'd just heard. Not fully. But something about it settled under her skin. Sharp and persistent. Her car pulled up. She walked toward it quickly. She didn't breathe until their voices faded. She didn't look back as she got in. But the words followed her anyway. Later that night, long after the city had quieted, and the lights of Manhattan burned steady below her windows, Mandy found herself replaying every moment of the evening. The penthouse. The way Young-soo had dismissed her. The way she had listened. And the voices outside. Mr. Go is here tonight. You don't cross the Go family. She didn't understand it. Not yet. But she wanted to. Needed to. So instead of opening her laptop, she reached for her phone. She texted her cousin Max. Max knew people. Understood the kind of circles Scarlett had somehow stepped into. Do you know a Go Young-soo? The reply came almost immediately. Where did you hear that name? Mandy frowned, typing back. He's my friend's boyfriend. There was a pause. Longer this time. Then, Mandy. Stay away from that man. Her chest tightened. Why? Another pause. Then. He's not just rich. He's the kind of powerful people don't talk about out loud. Mandy stared at the screen. Then another message. Mandy. Don't text me about him again. Delete this conversation after you read it. The words didn't explain anything, and somehow explained everything. Her mind began filling in the gaps on its own. The lowered voices. The careful distance. The way he never needed to raise his tone the way she had listened when he told her to leave. She set her phone down slowly. She hadn't just flirted with her best friend's boyfriend. She had stepped into something she didn't understand, and tried to make herself part of it. The way he had told her to leave, calm, final, made sense now. He had dismissed her without effort. Not just because he couldn't be bothered, but because, in his world, she didn't matter. Scarlett didn't cry that night. She sat in the window seat while Young-soo made tea she didn't ask for. Because he'd learned that in moments of distress she needed something warm in her hands and something to do with the stillness. He set it beside her. He sat across from her, close but not crowding, and he waited. "I feel stupid," she said finally. "Don't." I let her in. I kept making excuses. She wrapped both hands around the mug. "I saw it and told myself I was wrong." "You saw it. You just chose to be generous." He looked at her steadily. "Those are different failures. You knew from the beginning. I read people differently than you do. That's not a virtue." Something shifted in his expression. Scarlett stared down into her mug, her voice quieter now. "She's done it before," she said. "Not like this. But close enough." He didn't interrupt. If someone showed interest in me, she'd redirect it. Make it about her instead. A small, humorless breath left her. I never minded. I wasn't interested in them. I thought. She shook her head slightly. If she wanted the attention, she could have it. Young-soo watched her for a moment. "That wasn't harmless," he said quietly. She looked up at him. It wasn't loyalty either. The words settled between them. "I was angry tonight, Scarlett. Not because she crossed a line with me. Because she tried to." He stopped. Let out a short breath. She had learned this too. He chose his words the way a surgeon chose instruments, and sometimes the choosing took a moment. "Because she looked at you and saw something worth taking. And then she tried to reduce you to something she could replicate." Scarlett held his gaze. "She didn't want you," she said slowly. "That's not what it was." "No. She wanted to be me." "Yes." Scarlett was quiet for a moment. "That's sadder than if she'd wanted you." Young-soo looked at her like she was, once again, the most disarming person he had ever encountered. "It is," he said, with something in his voice that might, in another man, have been tenderness. In him it was simply truth, stated without armor. "I'm not angry at her," Scarlett said. "I want to be. I think I deserve to be." "You do?" "But I mostly just feel." She searched for the word. "Exposed. Like someone was studying me this whole time, and I thought it was friendship." He moved then. He crossed the space between them and sat beside her. And his hand came to her face. Palm against her cheek. Thumb at her jaw. That careful, unhurried touch that was the one thing in the world that made her feel like she was completely contained. "She studied you for weeks," he said quietly. "And she learned your surface. Your posture. Your rhythm. Your laugh." His thumb moved. "She learned none of the things that make you you. Because those things aren't visible. They have to be earned." Scarlett leaned into his hand. Let her eyes close. "Like what?" "The way you argue when something matters. The way you give people more grace than they deserve because you believe in who they could be. The way you get quiet when you're thinking instead of filling the silence." His voice had dropped, low and warm and private. "The way you look when you think no one is watching." She opened her eyes. He was looking at her the way he always looked at her when he thought she wasn't watching. Like she was the only fixed point in a room that was otherwise in motion. "No one could replace you," he said. She didn't understand that. She thought confidence was a posture to copy. She didn't understand it's just the evidence of someone knowing exactly what they are. Scarlett kissed him. Not desperately. Not with the feverish urgency of making herself feel better. She kissed him like a woman choosing something, deliberate and clear. His hand tightened fractionally on her jaw. He kissed her back with the kind of focused attention he gave to everything that mattered to him. Entirely, with nothing held in reserve. When she pulled back, both of them were breathing slower than before. Mandy called the following afternoon. Scarlett answered. The apology came quickly, tripping over itself. Mandy admitted she hadn't been trying to take Young-soo. She was crying by the third sentence and Scarlett believed her. Because Mandy was performing now too. But beneath the performance was something raw that recognized itself as real. "I didn't want him," Mandy said. I wanted to feel like you. Like someone wanted me the way he wants you. Like I could walk into a room and..." Her voice broke. "Mandy." Scarlett was quiet for a moment. "I know. I'm so sorry, Scarlett. I know you are." Silence. "But I can't do this right now," Scarlett said. Gently. The gentleness cost her something. It would have been easier to be cold. But she was who she was. "I need you to understand that what you did wasn't just one moment. It was weeks of something that made me feel like I was being taken apart and studied. And I deserve people who celebrate who I am." not people trying to wear it. Mandy's breath hitched. She was crying quietly now. Maybe someday, Scarlett said. But not now. Take care of yourself. She hung up. She sat with the feeling for a long time. The grief of it. The relief of it. Both at once. The way things were sometimes. Later that evening, Scarlett told Young-soo about the call with Mandy. He listened without interrupting, leaning against the counter, sleeves rolled to his forearms, the quiet weight of him filling the kitchen. When she finished, she looked at him, this man of stillness and unspoken gravity, and felt that familiar vertigo of loving someone who existed in dimensions she was still learning to see. You always knew, she said quietly. I had an idea. She let out a soft breath. You make it sound simple. It isn't, he said. She studied him for a moment. You just don't look away from things, she said. His gaze held hers. Neither do you. You just give people more time than they deserve. She crossed the kitchen and stepped into him, her arms sliding around his waist. His hands came to her back immediately, steady, certain. The way a man holds something he has no intention of losing. Her cheek rested against his chest, and she felt the slow, unhurried rhythm of his heart. Thank you, she murmured into his shirt, for seeing me. From the beginning. He lowered his head and pressed a kiss to the top of her hair, not possessive, just quiet and absolute. You made it easy, he said. You were already there. I just looked. Later, much later, the city dark outside and the penthouse warm and dim. They found their way to each other with a slowness that had nothing to do with uncertainty and everything to do with wanting to exist inside the moment rather than rush through it. He laid her down against the white linen and looked at her in the low light. Her braids spread against the pillow. Her brown skin warm and luminous. Her eyes holding his without flinching. She had stopped flinching from his gaze weeks ago. He thought about that sometimes. The specific gift of it. You're beautiful, he said. You always say that like you're confirming a fact. I am. His hands moved to her waist, her hips, learning the language of her the way he'd been learning it since the beginning. Facts don't require embellishment. She laughed, that bright, genuine sound, and then he kissed her, and the laughter dissolved into warmth. And the warmth became something deeper. She arched into his touch, and he was careful with her in the way he was careful with the only things in the world he could not afford to lose. Absolutely. Without exception. Without restraint held back from tenderness. Afterward she lay against his chest, and listened to his heart slow. And the city stretched out below them in 10,000 lights. And she thought. This is what Mandy wanted to copy. Not the dress. Not the posture. Not the earrings. This. The feeling of being known, completely, by someone who chose it. That was the one thing that could not be imitated. 4 months later, spring had decided to mean something in New York. The particular aggressive bloom of it. Cherry blossoms in the park, and the smell of warm concrete after rain. Scarlett sat on the terrace of Young-soo's penthouse with her feet tucked under her and her coffee going cold because she kept getting distracted by the view. Not the skyline. Him. He was on a call inside, pacing slowly, the way he paced when the call mattered but didn't require his full alarm. She could see him through the glass, barefoot in dark trousers, his shirt untucked, the tattoos on his forearms catching the morning light. He was talking with that still, measured focus. Whoever was on the other end was probably writing things down. She thought about who she had been 6 months ago. The woman who had sat across from him at their first dinner and been so dazzled and so terrified that she'd barely tasted her food. The woman who had felt, for years, that being next to Mandy meant being slightly to the left of the spotlight. She didn't blame herself for any of it. She had simply been someone who didn't know yet what she already was. Young-soo had not taught her that. She wanted to be precise about this, because it mattered. He had not given her confidence the way it was described in movies, as something gifted from a man to a woman who had been waiting for it. He had simply, from the first moment, she understood now, looked at her and reflected back something that had always been present. He had never compared her to Mandy, never suggested she needed to change, never indicated, by word or gesture or silence, that she was in competition with anyone. He had treated her as fixed, as complete. And she had grown into the shape of how he saw her. The way plants grew toward consistent light. The glass door opened. Your coffee's cold, he said. I know. He came and sat beside her, taking the mug from her hands. And she watched his face in profile as he looked out at the city, the clean, uncompromising lines of him. The faint morning light softening him in a way he would never allow in public. She had access to this. This version. Barefoot and unhurried. The guard sat down. She had been thinking, lately, about what it meant to be the person a man like Go Young-soo chose to be soft for. There was a particular weight to it. A responsibility. He was not soft for anyone. He had built the walls so thoroughly that most people didn't know walls existed. They simply knew he was impenetrable and moved accordingly. He was not impenetrable to her. She found that terrifying and sacred in equal measure. I've been thinking, she said. He looked at her. Waiting. About Mandy. She paused. I don't think I'm angry anymore. Good. He handed her coffee back. I think I understand what happened. She was trying to find something and she looked for it in the wrong place. She wrapped her hands around the mug, still warm from his. I hope she finds it. I genuinely do. He was quiet for a moment. That's generous. It's honest. She met his gaze. She wanted what she thought I had. But what I have is this. And you can't copy this. You just have to build it with the right person and let it take whatever time it takes. Young-soo studied her face in that thorough, private way he had. The way that still, occasionally, made her want to look away. I want to say something, he said. Okay. I didn't change who you are. He said it simply, with no ceremony. The way he said all the things that mattered most. I didn't make you confident or compelling, or the kind of person people notice when they walk into a room. You were all of that before I saw it. He held her eyes. I just refused to let you be unconvinced of it. Scarlett blinked. The warmth that moved through her was not like the heat of desire, though that existed too. Rich and constant between them. This was something older and quieter. The warmth of being known. Of being kept. That might be the most romantic thing you've ever said to me, she said. And you said it like you were reading from a report. The corner of his mouth moved. She reached up and put her hand against his jaw. The familiar line of it, and he let her. Turning slightly into the touch the way he did when they were alone, and he didn't need to be anything other than this. I love you, she said. I know. His voice was quiet. His hand covered hers. I love you. They sat together on the terrace while the city woke below them, spring light stretching across the skyline in gold. His hand covered hers. The coffee went cold again. Neither of them mentioned it. There was nowhere they needed to be. There was no one else. There was only this. The two of them, unhurried. In the kind of peace that doesn't announce itself. The kind that arrives quietly, after the storm has passed, and settles into the spaces where fear used to live. And stays.